Hello, and welcome to Self-Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We're a podcast that's here to generate and share self-care ideas with each other. Last episode was about the difference between self-care and self-control. And we talked about how we can manage ourselves in a loving way and still get shit done. If you missed out on that show, you can always find us pretty much anywhere. iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Podbean, PodNation, Spreaker, Stitcher, and even at our website, www.selfcareissexy.com. I want to give you a quick preview of what to expect from today's show. Today, I'm actually pretty excited about this episode. I know I say that a lot, but I'm really excited. I actually wish that I could have done this one like way back in the beginning. Like a lot of people ask me ooh, which episode should I start with? Like if they're new to the podcast or they find out about the show and they ask me which ones I like the best. And I usually say if it's an interview-wise, it's the Manisode with Glenn. I absolutely love that episode. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it's episode 75, way back in the Take Me Back machine. You can find that episode. But today, I really want to go over the subtle things that you might be doing that are actually not only preventing you from getting self-care, but bringing your intentional self-worth down. We're also going to talk about how to avoid these kinds of patterns, as well as some self-care that you can do to help you heal from this if this is something that you find yourself falling into. But first, a few quick housekeeping notes. All right, so it's true. If you're new to the show, welcome. My name is Chris. I'm your host. I've been doing the podcast for a few years now. I interview people about self-care. I ask them what they're doing, how it's working for them, what happens when they don't get the self-care they need. And then we just generally talk about life and sort of barriers that present themselves when it comes to getting the self-care that we all know we absolutely need. However you found this podcast, you're tuning in because you know that self-care is good for you. You know that it's going to help you have a more fulfilled life. You know that taking care of yourself first makes you the best asset to all of the people around you. And you know that self-care is sexy. So you're here, you're tuned in, and you're ready to go. Well, what if you know all that, but you've got these pretty low-key habits that you might not even really be aware that you're doing that are actually killing your chances of getting any kind of meaningful self-care. And if self-care is not really natural to you, if you find it really super hard to make yourself the priority, or if you feel like you're just like a natural caretaker, but that you know that you're disconnected from yourself, it might be these little things that you're not really noticing that are affecting the likelihood of whether or not you're going to actually get some self-care or not. And let's face it, if you're listening to the podcast, you're just really not that stellar at taking great care of yourself. While there are these things on my list that I'm about to go over, might not really apply to you, right? Or you might think to yourself, this isn't something that I particularly do. Well, that doesn't really matter because I want you to be thinking about some of the ways that you are currently telling yourself that you're not good enough for self-care or that you really don't deserve your own time and energy. I want you to think about the ways that you're actually treating yourself, on the subconscious level, from the way that you talk to yourself to the way that you plan your days. Just start thinking about why it is you're having a difficult time making self-care any kind of a priority, why it's not really that top of your list, or why your mental health isn't really something that you're, checking in on constantly. So if these things don't apply to you and you say, Chris, I'm not doing that, this thing doesn't matter, I just want you to be in the mindset of there are things that you're doing and there are ways that you're behaving that are going to directly affect whether or not you're actually going to get the self-care that you need. And in order to really figure out what's preventing you, what are those barriers, you got to look a little deeper sometimes, figure them out, say, hello, I see you, and then recognize when they're happening so that you can just redirect your habit brain to remembering oh yeah, I am the kind of person that takes care of myself. I am the kind of person that makes self-care the priority. I am the kind of person that says, hey, you know what? I'm worth it, so I'm going to do what I want to do with my time today. All right, so the 10 things that you're probably doing that's killing your chances of getting self-care. Number 1 is that you're rushing around. Now, I've had a couple of different episodes. One's called Hit by the Busy Bus. There's a couple other episodes that I've done where I talk about being busy and always being in a hurry as a way to mask something else. Now, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not your therapist, and I'm certainly not your mama, so I'm not going to get into that with you, but I want you to start thinking about that. Because if rushing and being busy and constantly having something to do is preventing you from looking at something that's going on in your life, maybe that's something you're not looking at is taking care of yourself. So here's the thing. If you're a busy person and you tell me, look, Chris, I don't have time for self-care. I'm too busy to stop what I'm doing and take care of myself. Well, the inevitability is that you're gonna crash. You're going to hit a wall. Something's going to happen. Because if you don't take the time, if you don't slow your pace, if you don't make your life sustainably manageable, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to have a major crash. Something's going to fall through, or the smallest, most insignificant little challenge is going to come up and it's going to rock your world to the core. Now, if that does not sound like a fun cleanup job to you, my suggestion is that you take it down a notch. Think of at least 1 or 2 things in your daily schedule that you can cut out so that you can replace it with some self-care. And if you're constantly busy, self-care for you is going to really look like being quiet, being in nature, taking time to make time last longer by reading. Right? Not by watching TV or endlessly scrolling the Facebook or being distracted by somebody else's issues. Self-care for someone who's busy is going to look like sitting your ass down and slowing down. Number 2 is worrying. If you tell me you can't get any self-care in because you've got so much going on, you're worried about so many things, I'm going to tell you in general, worry is killing your chances of self-care. Because if you're constantly thinking about what could go wrong, how to prevent what could go wrong, what other people are thinking about you, or worrying about what you're not doing or what you're doing and how that might be affecting other people, when you get into that spiral of suck where you're constantly worrying and pre-planning future disasters, you're definitely not going to have time for self-care. And you're certainly not going to be in the mindset where you deserve and feel like you deserve your own time and effort, because your time and effort is constantly in the worry bucket of what could go wrong next. And that is a huge problem. So if you're a chronic worrier, if you're someone who cannot get out of your own head with the disaster planning, the catastrophizing, the what's going to go wrong, what shoe will drop next, if that's you, self-care for you is going to be like taking those worries out of your head and putting them somewhere else, either through journaling or meditation or traditional talk therapy, or just straight up letting it go. Because how many times and how much energy have you spent on worrying about things that never happen? This is a huge problem for a lot of us, especially if you're easily overstimulated. If you're constantly worrying, your self-care is going to look like getting into a place where you can put those worries down. Maybe implore some help. If there's something you're really concerned about, finances, relationships, friends, your job, find somebody who can help you with those things so you can set that worry down and use the additional headspace and time to take care of yourself and heal from all that damage done by worrying about shit that ain't ever gonna happen anyways. Number 3. Now, I'm going to say this one and a lot of people's eyes are going to roll. I can already feel it, but just follow me. Eating foods that you don't like. Super subtle, way under the radar, but it is killing your chances of actually getting self-care. And here's why. If you're eating food that you don't like just because you're finishing up the leftovers, or you're eating something because your mom made it and she's like going to be super disappointed if you don't just try a bite because it's your favorite, and she knows you've been worrying all day, so she made it for you, and why aren't you eating it? I thought you were upset, that kind of thing. Or if you're agreeing to eat when you're not hungry. So the overall theme with this one is that if you are physically putting food into your body, and that goes with alcohol or anything else, and you're not doing it from a place of loving kindness, or at least with a monicum of on purpose, then you're killing your chances of really taking care of yourself. Your mind is telling your body, shut up, take what I'm giving you, and don't worry about it. And that is directly teaching your brain you don't give a shit about yourself. Not enough to stop eating when you're not hungry or when you don't want to, or you're eating things that you don't want to. It's a trauma response to eat food out of obligation or because you're feeling like, oh my gosh, if I don't, I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. Well, the truth is when you do those kinds of actions, and really in general, when you're trying to people please and you're trying to do things you don't want to do because you don't want someone else to be upset with you, well, now you're really teaching yourself two really bad habits. One, you're not worth taking the time to do what you want to do, whether it's feed your body or do a certain thing that you want to do. And two, you're teaching yourself that it's easier to just manipulate people by your behavior than it is to just stand up for yourself and say, no, I don't want that. No, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want that broccoli. No, I don't want to go to your bar mitzvah. No, I don't want an extra file on my desk because you've got something you need to do and this needs to get done. Right? This goes back to boundary setting, but it's more important because we're talking specifically about the things that are subtly killing your self-care. And when you're constantly feeding yourself, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, stimulants, people, situations, when you're constantly feeding yourself shit you don't want, you are killing yourself and you're not allowing the self-care. You're literally doing the damage that we're trying to undo with self-care. Number 4, this kind of ties into that. If you're listening to someone who's bitching and complaining, when you've given them solutions or you've tried to help them or just basically giving people your energy and giving it away to people who don't deserve it, and then you're sitting around wondering like why you're so tired all the time or why you don't have time for self-care. When you're doing this habit, and it's so subtle, we all do it, right? You got that friend, we all got that friend that every time they talk to you, 2 seconds, 3 seconds into the conversation, how are you? And then they unload with all the same problems you just heard from them last month when you talked to them, right? They've got the same relationship problems. They've got the same financial problems. They've got the same dead-end job. There's all these different things that they keep complaining about. And every time you give them your ear, you give them your energy, and you try to help them through that, you're training yourself that you deserve to be the waste bucket for this person's garbage. You have determined that you are the, quote, safe place, right, for this person. You're giving them space. Great, that's fabulous. Do it a couple times. Ask them if they want your advice. If you give them your advice, they don't take it, they don't make any changes, and you're hearing the same shit over and over. When you subject yourself to that, you are diminishing the chances that you're actually going to take time for yourself because you're allowing other people to take that energy from you. So the chances of there being anything left over after that conversation that's going to make you consciously be like, woo, that was a toughie. I think I'm going to go take a bath, or I'm going to go paint my nails, or I'm going to fucking just sit and stare out into space, or like do some sort of clearing, healing, saging meditation of some kind. You're not going to conscientiously think of those things because you're going to be too drained, and especially if it's a repetitive pattern. So just stop it. If you got a toxic friend in your life that's just unloading their garbage week after week after week, just tell them, hey, I've given you options. I've told you what I think you should do. move it along, sister. This is not the dumpster. You don't get to just unload your crap here. If you want to have an open friendship with me where we discuss together mutually about solutions and problems that we're experiencing and move on to other things, sign me up. I'm all for that. Anything else is killing your chances that you're going to actually do anything.